Hello and welcome to our episode 3 of Enterprise Tech India Unplugged. And with me, I have Kumaran, who is the CTO and chief mentor for Tiny Magic. And I realized that I spelled it wrong last time around, and Kumaran sort of agreed with the wrong spelling also. Yeah. So and I also have Nitho, who is an architect with Vachusa, and today we have this sort of a grave topic of layoffs to be discussed, and this is of course this layoffs is a unique thing which happens in the industry, and but at large scale layoffs is always a concern for our people in South Asia, especially, and who believe that jobs are for life and who have never seen layoffs in their lifetime. And I can talk from personal experience. I have been laid off at least once, right? So, and that was almost 15 years ago. But it's not a very good feeling to be laid off, right? And what we are sort of discussing here is what can you do if you get laid off, or what should organization be doing to handle layoffs better, and what are some of the reasons behind these layoffs. So what is Kumar, share your view of what do you think is happening in industry right now?
Just that you mentioned, I have also been laid off 15 years ago. Okay, that's just before joining Microsoft because the startup which I was working with ran into a problem. Okay,
Right.
and uh, and it's kind of interesting to know there are two cases where you will be the first on the list of the ones who are going to get laid off. Okay, either you are the highest paid person,
Mhm.
okay, or you are the poorest performer of all.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting. Both the top and the bottom,
They
okay,
will be taken
are
off.
actually the prime pickers when a list is being made. Okay.
Right. Right.
And fair to say, I was on the high paid person list. And if you're contributing more, you'll be high paid. Okay.
Right.
So now, whenever we say, I want to be the top most paid in the organization, we also should be aware that I'm going to be the first one on the picking list
Right.
when it comes to something like that, something like
Right.
a layoff. And
Right.
what helped me personally was to kind of always, it's more from a, as an individual level, I will have to have at least a 6 to 8 month cash reserve available or a easily liquidable money that's available for
Mhm.
running my family. So let's say I needed, let's say, 100,000 rupees per
Mhm.
month, okay,
Mhm.
at a bare minimal. Then I should be able to have 700,000 rupees or 7 lakhs, which
Mhm.
is easily liquidable overnight. So
Right.
that's the first thing I would do at a personal level. Okay, so that kind of removes a lot of pressure on me. The
Right.
second thing is obviously look for places, always keep a network in your connection by working with startups or being a part of community events, right?
Right.
Take that time off, even though you are in a safe corporate job, be involved with the ecosystem, a startup ecosystem or community knowledge clubs, SQL Server forums like that, where you are in connection with the local people around you. And because you are a good expertise, you have to contribute to them for you to be treated with value. It seems disconnected, but that's why I'm bringing up the point. Being a
Right.
community contributor helps in these situations.
Building that network, especially, right? So building,
Building
making
that
sure.
network.
Yes. Yes.
So when you run into trouble, you can reach out to the network. And personally, it helped me because there were smaller companies who couldn't offer me a job, but they
Mhm.
were more than happy to take me as a 1 day consultant or a 2 day consultant in a week. Now,
Right.
I had two companies who I could consult at 25K, 25K, which means I
Right.
made 50K per month.
Right. And plus, you had
Okay.
the backup.
plus I have the backup, right? So I have my working experience clock ticking. My money is also not draining fast. Now I'm not under pressure.
Right.
Okay, now I'm also getting the cool tag of a consultant. So this is one of the ways in which I managed it at a personal level.
Personal level. Right. Right. I think this is a very, very good suggestion for people to actually making sure, especially the highly paid individuals in niche roles who people believe they can be let off and maybe put on something like a consultant job. It says we need you only half the time, right? So maybe that, and that is probably an option for organizations to think about, that all these is even smaller organization when they need these skills, but they don't need these skills throughout the year or throughout the 5 years they need to run their projects, right? Maybe this is a very good option for smaller organization to utilize these highly skilled people, right? Where they don't need them for so long, right? So, Nito, what do you think about this layoff scenarios in your personal experience with layoffs, if you have had in any? But I'm not assuming that you have had. But what do you think about it?
Even though it's not technically in India, I think, but the
Yes,
dynamics of Colombo and Sri
South
Lanka is
Asia.
pretty much
Yeah,
similar, right?
yeah, yes.
Yeah, it's actually the economy is a lot more different in terms of IT in India and Sri Lanka. It's actually much smaller and younger. So,
Mhm.
so there is a lot of spin-offs and startups and coming up, and when some people bring a new initiative, there's always a need for human capital in terms of IT. It will change, sooner or later, but that doesn't mean situations like layoff mass, relatively mass layoffs uh, are not, uh, not it's inevitable anyway at this point.
Mhm.
It's not personally I have not experienced this, but at the same time I have seen it happen. And especially when sometimes when you're working with companies in US and you will have a very good rapport with the management that we had, and all of a sudden all the guys you have been worked with is no longer there. It's a brand new management, brand new set of people coming in. The people who were we had a good relations going in terms of knowledge and things like that, they are no longer there, and then you scramble trying to find out the next person. So that actually it's not one time, by now several times we have run into this particular issue. But I'm speaking from a people who is still going to be inside the company, but I, like Kumaran
Ah,
said, for the people who is outside the company, it's just also about whether you really push yourself a little bit to say, hey, if the company wants this, but are you just not thinking about what is going to be next, and just blindly following what the company need at that point in time.
You're not
Always
investing
I
in yourself. You're not investing in
yes, exactly.
yourself. Yeah. Right.
Because it's actually you are consumed by work, of
Right.
course, but then
Right.
again you have to also look at whether the one that I'm doing is going to give me the next job I would be looking for. And if there is a bunch of people going to get out, am I still going to have that demand? Is an important question to ask,
Right.
because everybody has their own pluses, and
Right.
uh, and you have to find your pluses. I'm kind of talking at this point a bit theoretical and philosophical, but
Right.
it is what it is eventually. Because when there are 10,000 or 50,000 people coming out,
Mhm.
you need to also figure out how you're going to present yourself in there. It's not going to be all that population is going to end up actually in the same place, another place. So that is when you kind of find yourself the unique positions. And like Kumaran said, he was able to be in that position of consultant because he had a special skill in there. And
Right.
that, without thinking about that, while you have a stable thing going on, and
Mhm.
especially for those people at the top and the bottom, definitely have to have a second thought at this point. And the top case what Kumaran said was true. It's very true, because whenever somebody wanted to have a business strategy changed, they first have to change the people, because otherwise the strategy is never, the new strategy is not going anywhere.
Well, actually, one of the things with this great outsourcing, which has benefited a lot of South Asia, is that at one point you were the cause of layoffs in rest of the world, right? So you have to see the other side of the picture, right? Because a lot of these jobs came to South Asia, in India, and in a lot of places in Asia, were because those jobs disappeared in the West, right? And so they have, over a period of time, gotten used to of this cycle of employment and unemployment, and getting hired and rehired, and this whole concept of gig economy, the kind which Kumaran talked about, that I get to work for 2 3 different companies in a month, right? And I still make a decent living. It may not be the same secure, uh, the monthly salary which you are getting, but at least you are able to use your skills, and you still have a nice living. But Kumar, specifically around organization, how should organizations actually handle this? Because of course we understand there are business realities, there are sometimes mistakes made, where contracts are lost. There's so many factors which influence why the organizations have to take a painful decision like layoffs, right? So, what should organizations do differently?
I, I would, it was interesting when Nitho said that, right? I have my entire management chain vanishing. Okay. To the, who I report to, right? That manager vacuum. My manager's manager vanished overnight. Okay.
Right.
Now that's another problem of something like this happens. So I would, it actually that gave me an insight is that whether it is at every level of an organization, right? They need to look at top and bottom and kind of say, if the top layer is gone, how will I handle? If my bottom layer is gone, how will I handle? So at each layer, they need to think like that and work on a concrete plan to say something like they will always say. It's like our backup operational testing that we do, right? You pull
Right.
up the network cable and do something like that. So they would say, you know what? 8 months from now, assume my top management is not there. What will I do? Right? I
Right.
have to report directly to the, like, instead of reporting to the GM today, I have to report to the SVP. That means all the GM's duty will come to me.
Right.
How am I going to handle it? Okay. Or the GM thinks the senior manager, my level, is going to get removed and I'm just going to have junior developers. How will I
Right.
handle that if I don't have that layer in between? So when we start thinking like this, right, and constantly working on a learning plan or a skilling each level, right?
Mhm.
I think then it helps us prepare for a scenario like this. Now, if a scenario like this doesn't happen, we are ready for scaling. If shit happens, then you're ready
Mhm.
for survival. So
Right.
either ways, it becomes a good thing to work on. So if you have to cut down people, you survive. If you don't have to cut down people, you can scale out.
Right. Right. So what you're saying is that organization need to develop this muscle, like just the way they are developing this business continuity plans for IT infrastructure. They need to have a people continuity plan,
Yeah,
right? They have.
I think in one previous talk you had mentioned, right? Let's call it a capability, people capability map or a
Mm-hmm.
people capability plan. I mean, there is,
Right.
it exists in some form,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess the key point, having worked in people and HR and L&D, right? Now,
Mm.
classically, that is treated as a HR problem, whereas
Right.
it should be taken as a functional manager's problem. People capability should be a key part of the functional manager. Today,
Right.
people capability is a HR responsibility.
So there are a lot of organizations who do it differently, right? Because people management obviously is a very specialized kind of activity within a business environment, right? Which doesn't always get the kind of respect which it should get, right? Because finally, most of the specialized work is always done by humans and it is not done by robots or even technology for that matter, right? So create the technology, to envision the technology, to implement it, you still need human beings, right? So this people management capability, what is your opinion about, is people management being really looked at in that way which it really deserves to be looked at, or people are just used as machine parts uh, within a big large machine called the organization? What do you think, in your experience with Indian organizations? I'm not talking about multinational corporations. I'm talking about especially organizations which originate in this region, and which are actually managed like, unlike the multinational corporations which are managed in a uniquely Indian or the uniquely South Asian, maybe Sri Lankan way of management. Do you think the managements in our region have that kind of enlightenment of that kind, or they don't?
I think it's not a question of enlightenment. I think everybody has got good potential. Personally, I believe that. But I
Hmm.
think we start off on a wrong foot itself. The people management and resource management itself is the first place where we go wrong. I
Hmm.
want to go south, okay, but I
Hmm.
start off looking at the north direction, north star,
Hmm.
north pole,
Hmm.
okay. So rather we would need to look at it. It's not about people management. It is
Hmm.
about a business capability of
Hmm.
which people is one component. That's all.
Right,
So
right.
it is all about business capability development. Do
Hmm.
what it takes to do that.
Hmm.
Once people, once we start aligning our process, right? As a manager, as a HR, anybody, my job is to develop the business capability. Like whether it's sales, I have to develop sales. I have to improve delivery,
Hmm.
right? For which there is a human component. So there's
Right,
managing people there.
right.
So then once you kind of shift that, no, I'm not going to manage people anymore. That's not my job,
Hmm.
right? There are no people
Hmm.
managers. There are only capability developers.
Hmm.
And dealing with human is one component of that.
Okay.
Then I think a lot of other things will fall into place automatically. Nitho had some ideas about hiring architects, hiring people. So maybe he can kind of
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
that method perspective to that.
Yeah. What do you talk about it,
So
Nito?
yeah, so I think there used to be a time where this hiring was simply left out for like you said HR for the most part, and the managers
Recruiter. Yeah.
but right now, like the way that happening, especially with the methodology in the IT sector in terms of delivering solutions, the agile methodology and things like that comes into play. Now everybody need to know their people, because
Hmm.
they are expected to deliver certain capacity.
Hmm.
So it has become much more linear and lenient, and also much more useful for the architects to involve and actually in the hirings.
Hmm.
And what uh, most of in my organization and in other organizations I have seen. So now, the architects are given the full responsibility to actually able to pick their own people. And the part there is you also have to live with. There's a penalty clause as well. You also have
Hmm.
to live with the pick for a
Hmm.
little while at least, giving a breathing room. So sometimes the wrong decisions can be made uh, in terms of hiring, or the position that we hired is no longer available, so you still have to deal with it, but that particular responsibility is actually offloaded to the team, so
Hmm.
it takes out of a small piece out of their mind anyway. So that way, people are going to be a lot more responsible in terms of who they pick, because they
Mm.
also know, they have to deal with it, because the guidelines is now that, will you hire this person for your team? And most likely that person is going to be in your team. So in that case, real good look at what they want to pick. And also there are situations where we need this many people to start the project. So people are trying to just bring in everybody out there that you can actually do. But then again, that is where things can go wrong. I remember Kumaran mentioning about it could be natural that people when they want to start a project with 50 people or something like that, they just go by pick up 50 people, doesn't necessarily know what their capability skills need to be on the project, right? And that becomes kind of a debt for the organization that has to deal with, right? Kumaran, you have any thoughts there?
No, actually, that's interesting, but I'm just curious on the difference, right? Like, even if you look at 15, 20 years ago, there was always a technical round and the architect could do that, right? So he was always a part of the hiring process. So I'm sure you're trying to tell something more that's happening because a technical round was always there. So what is say architects own the hiring process?
So, so it actually have a two different side of to it. We kind of look at the long term and the short term. So,
Go ahead.
yeah. So the long term and the short term, because sometimes you cannot, you don't have a need right now, but you might actually have a need coming down the line. This is pretty much a resource management, point of view. But if architects don't think about it, they're gonna be in a situation where they will be looking for certain things happens, they're gonna be scrambling, trying to deal with it at that moment.
Okay.
So you actually pull a little bit of a burden from resource management and say, hey, I'm also going to be there with you, trying to figure out how to solve this problem without just saying, hey, give me resources. So only thing that we kind of make sure the resource management in point is bring me the CVs or the candidates, but selection we will take care of it, because it's not just a technical round. It's about actually you are you're selecting for your team, totally different. Selecting for your team is that means you are responsible for that person for a non-future. But just technical interview, anybody can do technical interview and say a yes or no, and they could be end up in a different project, and they may not be really useful, or
Got it.
not a match.
So in a way, it's like getting married. Only short term. There's a commitment that you're making to the person who are bringing on board.
Yes. So do you think the
it is
organization?
actually the selection process of the marriage that you are involved in.
Right. Okay.
So now that you are accountable for it. So being involved means you are accountable for getting that person up to speed and making sure that he's placed in the right job and he stays long enough, right? So I believe a lot of organizations have this concept of multiple levels of interviews, and I remember uh, Microsoft does at least 5 or 6 rounds of interviews for any role, and this is not just technical roles, but any kind of a role, and this is a process which they follow, and a lot of organizations have different ways of doing it. Kumar, specifically around the sensitivity part, do you think the organizations are sensitive to handle such things appropriately, or is there something they need to learn from what has happened in the West? Or I know of personally there is a procedure laid out for how layoffs happen in the West. Actually, they have a they bring your manager and you to a table and they make you sign those papers and they actually escort you out of the building. So that is the layoffs actually happen inside Western. Uh, uh, in US, specifically, I would say, I would not say just Western, but in US, that's how layoffs actually happen. They actually do physically escort you outside the building, which I don't believe is a very good feeling, even though you may have a job in your pocket. But no matter who you are or uh, how well you are paid, when you are escorted out of a building which you have worked for years, it's not a very good feeling. Do you think that kind of sensitivity exists in the organizations in our region?
I completely agree with you. I think there, and when you take people and something especially as sensitive as laying off, we cannot do what's done in the West, right? The dynamics are completely different. To evolve something else for ourselves. And I think currently we are at a very immature state of handling it. We are very immature. Okay. And we have to figure out phase. I haven't seen any company handling it very well. There are some who kind of have a smooth landing kind of a thing where they have other skilling support, they provide recruiting support, that kind of stuff. So those are good things which I have seen.
Hmm.
I think uh, some of the things which I would kind of immediately come is give them a soft landing, which is
Hmm.
basically probably whatever they do, right? Financially, I think they do it. The other thing is to give recruitment support. And the other thing which you are telling is, can I use you as a consultant itself, like 1 day a week or a 2 day a week, where you're still not alienated, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they need to get innovative. We have to get
Yeah.
innovative here. So, for
Right.
example, we can tell something like, you know what, you have, I would want you to move to a 1 day per week consulting mode.
Hmm.
Okay.
Right.
And
Right.
then you can look for something else. So, if you look at it, the person is not on the streets. He can still come to the office every day.
Right. Right.
So, we need to get more creative in India. We
Hmm.
cannot adopt the same methodology of a pink slip in
Hmm.
India.
Right.
We have
I
to be
think
very conscious.
yeah. Yeah. I think that sensitivity, because I remember when I was laid off, it was completely Western style, and it was actually a sort of a mass layoffs, and like people were sitting in a classroom with their managers, and people are signing their resignation, and although I already had a job, even then I really felt bad that this is the way it is being done, and it's like means I literally saw people crying actually. I mean, it's a very big thing for somebody to lose their livelihood, and it was really a sad scenario. And I think what you say here is really important, that we cannot do it the same way it has been practiced for probably decades in US and other places. We need to evolve something which is maybe culturally more suitable, and also more sensitive to what we have grown up with, and make people at least have a soft landing, like you said. Okay. So, Kumaran, what is the book which you recommend for this episode?
There is a very interesting book called What Color is Your Parachute?
What
Okay,
color
it
is your
talks about
parachute?
care.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how do you, and it actually helped me during my layoff time on how to switch careers. In short, it's something like, let's say you want to switch career, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, for example, I want to move from technical to management, and you are
Mm-hmm.
VP Tech or you're like senior manager technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we say, I want to go into finance. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when we switch jobs, we try to get a promotion or a hike.
Right.
So if I want to go from senior manager to GM, I cannot go to senior manager technical to GM finance. So you kind of say
Right.
senior manager to senior manager technical,
Mm-hmm.
be that company, be for some time, learn and become general manager finance. Or
Right.
I become general manager finance, general
Mm-hmm.
manager technology in my company, and then go to general manager finance. So that book kind of tells how to navigate the structure, right? Build your side capabilities, how to go up. So it's a great book. And I think layoff can be just a motivation. I think we have to understand that business scenarios change. And I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
very great book to look at your career and skills and capabilities, how to deal with them.
All right. Thank you, Kumaran. This is a great recommendation and very timely for the people who have been affected by these layoffs. And I hope they find value in reading this. Right. So thank you very much for giving your views, Nitho and Kumaran. And see you in 2 weeks' time. We are thinking of making this into a weekly podcast if Kumaran agrees, because I believe there is enough input
Agree.
available for us. Kumaran, we can hear you still. Right. So thank you and see you next time. Bye.